All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA Practice Exam series. This is exam number 7, and we're going to go through the next set of questions together and break them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass our exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Last night, Patricia slept the best she has slept in several days. In the morning, Patricia is talking with her husband and says, I slept great. I think it must have been the fact we stayed up late or because I had that cup of coffee around noon. Patricia is demonstrating what goal of behavior analysis as a science. What are our 3 goals of behavior analysis as a science? This is at the very top of your task list, and you've got to know these. So we have description, prediction, and control. With description, you're simply describing a phenomenon, hopefully objectively, but you're simply describing what is taking place. With prediction, you're now trying to draw correlations and hypotheses by associating events with one another. Control is when you take those hypotheses and you actually start to experiment and try to develop experimental control or a functional relationship. You can see the 3 different levels of our goals. Now, what is Patricia doing? Well, she slept great last night and tells her husband it must have been we stayed up late or because I had that cup of coffee around noon. If Patricia had just said, last night I slept great, she would be describing this behavior. But she takes it a step further and says, I slept great because we stayed up late or because I had that cup of coffee around noon. She's starting to make correlations. She's starting to hypothesize what is going on, and she's predicting why she slept so well. What would control be? Well, control would be if Patricia, for the next week, only stays up late and then measures how that affects her behavior. And then the next week, she has a cup of coffee around noon, and it measures how it affects her behavior. If she can establish experimental control, then she's demonstrated control. But up to this point, all Patricia has done is simply predicted the reason she slept so well. You want your behavior technician to assist you with a direct assessment. You tell them the target behavior is finger flicking, which is when the client flicks their fingers together rapidly. Whenever the technician observes the behavior, they're to write down what happened right before and after the behavior, while also giving a description of the behavior. What kind of assessment is this? We have an assessment question. And what do we know about the scenario? What are we trying to assess? Well, you are doing a direct assessment for one, and you are assessing finger flicking. So this is our target behavior. And so when your technician is observing finger flicking, what are they to do? Well, they are to write down what happened right before and after, meaning the antecedents and consequences, and then describe the behavior. So we know this is a direct assessment. We know we aren't manipulating anything, so we can rule out a functional analysis. And so we can narrow this down to probably descriptive assessments. So now we have to determine what kind of descriptive assessment are we using. A, ABC narrative recording. With ABC narrative recording, you take data when the behavior occurs, it's open-ended, and you're doing what this technician is doing. You're writing down what happened before, what happened after, and giving a description. What's the difference between narrative and continuous? With continuous, you've got a pre-coded data sheet, and you're taking data continuously for a set amount of time. In this case, you're only taking data when the behavior occurs, and it's open-ended. The technician is writing their own antecedents and consequences. Continuous recording involves pre-coded data sheets and antecedents and consequences. And then scatter plot recording is when we are looking at the time of the behavior, meaning we're trying to figure out a pattern of when the behavior occurs. For instance, does the behavior happen more often in the morning, the afternoon, the evening? That's what scatter plot recording is typically used for. That's not the case here, not our interest here. And then we ruled out functional analysis early on because we're not actually manipulating anything. With the functional analysis, you're manipulating the antecedents and consequences. What's occurring here is this open-ended narrative recording as the behavior occurs. Consider the following examples. Which example contains point-to-point correspondence but no formal similarity? Verbal behavior questions, I think, are going to become very easy for you as you practice and get more fluent. One of the keys to verbal behavior is understanding point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity. When you think point-to-point correspondence, think about what is being communicated, and if what is being communicated is identical, it has point-to-point correspondence. When you think formal similarity, think about how communication is occurring. If both people are speaking, that's formally similar. If one is using picture cards and the other is speaking, that's lacking formal similarity. So our example needs point-to-point correspondence, meaning whatever's communicated is identical, but the form is different. How it's communicated is different. So A, Ms. Rachel says, "I'm so happy," and your daughter looks at you and smiles. Well, looking at you and smile can communicate something, but Ms. Rachel said, "I'm so happy." Your daughter looking at you and smiling, that is not point to point. The communicated response is not identical. B, you place an order at Raising Cane's and the cashier reads your order back to you prior to you pulling forward. Well, if they read your order back to you, we have point to point correspondence. What you communicated is identical to what they communicated, but it is formally similar. You spoke it, and then they spoke it. We need something without formal similarity. C, walking through your neighborhood, you look up and say, "Whoa, check out that airplane." Now it's attacked, right? So attacked is not going to have point-to-point correspondence given the fact attack is evoked by a nonverbal stimulus. So it has to be D. After conducting an interview for their dissertation, a graduate student watches the recording and writes out verbatim what was said. Now, the interview, right, was spoken. So they conducted the interview and then they wrote out verbatim what was said. So the what is communicated is identical, but one party spoke the message while the other one wrote the message. Therefore, it lacks formal similarity. Now, if you are just getting started, this topic can be very confusing. It took me a while to really internalize what point-to-point and formal similarity meant. But when I did it, verbal behavior really clicked. So work hard to understand point-to-point and formal similarity. Jake has an interview today at 1:30 p.m. Around 10 a.m., he starts prepping for the interview using interview questions he found online. Although he is happy with the answers he has prepared for the practice questions, what is essential if Jake wants to perform well during the interview? Now, we need Jake to perform well. And what is Jake doing? He's practicing. So when we have a learner who's practicing responses, what is our goal? Well, we need them to generalize. If they can only do it in practice, that does us no good. Same with Jake. Even though he's happy with the answers he's giving to the practice questions, what's going to be important? What's important is, can he give those great answers to real questions? What is essential here? A, response generalization. Response generalization in this scenario would be different responses to the practice questions, because the practice questions are the stimulus. We're not worried about different responses. His responses are good. We need those responses to occur in the presence of different stimuli. But what we need Jake to do is engage in stimulus generalization. Remember, stimulus generalization occurs when you have a response across multiple stimuli. We're much more concerned with Jake generalizing his answers to different stimuli. Non-contingent reinforcement. We don't need Jake to be performing non-contingent reinforcement. That's not Jake's role here. And then resistance to extinction. We don't know how Jake's behavior is going to be treated by, let's say, the real interviewer, but resistance to extinction, given the context, isn't necessarily relevant given the information we have. What we want Jake to do is generalize his answers to the other stimuli, more specifically to the real interview and the interview questions. Rhonda will throw her toys at her brother in order to get her brother's attention. This behavior has increased in frequency over the last week, and Rhonda's mom wants to put a stop to it. Now, each time Rhonda attempts to throw an item, Rhonda's mom grabs her arm before she can release the item. What technique is Rhonda's mom using? We're focused on Rhonda's mom's behavior and what technique she's using to what appears to be prevent her daughter from throwing the items. And so when the behavior occurs, when Rhonda attempts to throw an item, what does Rhonda's mom do? She grabs her arm before she can release the item. So what do we consider this? Is it A, extinction? It is not extinction. And why is that? Well, one, the behavior is occurring, get the brother's attention. Two, Rhonda's mom is not allowing the behavior to fully occur. In order to put a response on extinction, you've got to allow the response to occur. What Rhonda's mom is doing is response blocking. And response blocking is not extinction. Response blocking is a type of punishment. Don't get those two confused. Is it negative punishment? Well, no, because Rhonda's mom is grabbing the arm. She's adding the grab, right? The consequences her arm is grabbed. And it's not negative reinforcement because we're not sure, one, how behavior is affected in the future, and two, the consequence isn't removing anything. The consequence is adding the arm grab. And so what Rhonda's mom is doing is blocking the response. So Rhonda's mom is using response blocking. Again, extinction and response blocking aren't the same. Don't get them confused. Alden's favorite bar is near an airport. When he sits on the third floor of the bar, he can see all the airplanes take off while he is there. Alden and the bartender want to know how many airplanes take off in total each month. If Alden and the bartender were to graph this data each day, what type of display method would work best? Let's think about this. They want to graph their data, and what kind of data are they taking? Well, they're sitting on this third floor, and they're looking at the airplanes, and they're trying to determine how many airplanes take off in total each month. So if they're going to graph this, what's the best way to do that? Their goal is to find a total. And so what kind of graph will give you a total? A scatter plot. A scatter plot, again, would be good if they were trying to determine the different times of the planes. That's not their goal. What about a pie chart? Pie chart doesn't necessarily seem relevant unless, let's say, they were looking at different types of airplanes, maybe, or again, different times. What they would probably want to use is a cumulative record. Remember, this is what Skinner used and when he was doing his experiments. A cumulative record keeps an ongoing, ever increasing total. And so if they want to know how many airplanes take off each month, a cumulative record will be a great way to do it. Each day they could chart it, and at the end, they'd have a cumulative total of how many airplanes took off all together. So what method would work best is likely a C, a cumulative record. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.